Okay. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Yeah. Omar Saho, give a brief introduction about yourself. Then after I'll give a brief introduction about the day, then we continue from there. This is going to be a discussion. I'm going to be sort of a moderator because when the environmentalists gathered me, I can only take a bath seat and enjoy your company. Omar, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ahmed Saho from Gunju, the village, and then currently doing my master's program on sustainable international development, focusing more on social policy and as well as environmental conservation issues here in Massachusetts in Boston.
Okay, Omar Malmo.
All right, thank you very much. I am Omar Malmo Sambu. I am coordinator and lecturer in the environmental science program of the University of the Gambia. Of course, involved in a lot of environmental advocacy. So that's basically what I do as of now. Thank you.
Thank you, Famara.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am Famara Dampha. I am currently a PhD student here at the University of Minnesota. I'm actually studying climate change, economics, and natural resource management issues. Back in the Gambia, I was working with the National Disaster Management Agency before I left as director of admin. I also run a nonprofit in the Gambia called Household Disaster Resilience Project. In short, we call it Help Gambia. And that's in my free time, that's what I'm passionate about. So I kind of, work with young people, who are passionate about the environment to do what we can in the Gambia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Ahmed Manjang. I'm currently living and working in Saudi Arabia. I'm a microbiologist by training. And unfortunately, right, my research interest, what I'm doing is COVID-19. Yes, sequencing COVID-19 genes. So briefly, I'll give a brief introduction why we are here so that the people who are listening to us can know why we are here. So as you all know, today is World Art Day. In fact, it's exactly 50 years ago today when this movement come into being by Dennis Hayes. Dennis Hayes is an American, and he see the need that the way the world is going is not sustainable, and he decided to come up with this brilliant movement. And 20 years ago today, over 20 million Americans come out to the street. That was 1 in 10 Americans actually come out on the street to protest or to remind the American administration about the oil spills, the smokes. These were the very, very common themes during those days, and also the river pollutions taking place. So the first Earth Day in 1970, we launched a wave of action, including the passage of landmark environmental laws in the United States, which were later plagiarized by different, many nations all over the world, like the Clean Air, Clean Water, Endangered Species Acts, were all created in response to the first Earth Day in 1970, and as well as the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. So many countries soon adopted these similar laws, as they continue to hold major international significance. In fact, it was this day in 2016, the United Nations chose Earth Day as the day when the historical Paris Agreement on climate change was signed. Unfortunately, Donald Trump went back on this agreement and tore it into pieces. So on this day, 2020, we see all these tools and action that we have, big and small, to change our life and change our world, and not for one day, but forever. While the corona may force us to keep our distance, they call it social distance, I call it physical distancing, but, alhamdulillah, thanks to advancement in technology, we are here today, 4 of us facing each other, 2 in America, 1 in the Gambia, and 1 in Saudi Arabia. I think that is just brilliant. So we may be apart, but through the power of digital media, we are also more connected than ever. And April 22nd, so over the 24 hours of our day, As you see, if you go anywhere, it's all over the social media, and that's why we are also here to remind our people. No matter where you can make a difference, and you are not alone, because together we can save the earth. Thank you all very much. So I'll go to Omar. Omar, what does this day means to you, and why do you think we need to commemorate this day and in this fashion? Omar
Saho or
Saho.
Malmo?
Omar Saho.
It's gonna have fun
Oh,
here.
so I'll call your family names instead of your names.
Yeah,
Thank
the
you.
World Art Day is a very important day for people who are so much passionate about the environment, not only about the environment, but all the environmental resources, the interlink between environment and the society, and the interlink between environment and the economy. Because when I look at all these intersectionalities, how do we ensure we sustainably harvest the natural resources that can be like optimally used to support our economies? But how do you also ensure that there's not that much of exploitation of the natural resources? How do we also ensure that we talk about issue of like the human relationship with nature, societally, economic wise, and environmentally? How do we strengthen our environmental laws and policies? How do you also ensure that economic incentives from natural resource consumption? And how do we ensure that there's not that much exploitation of our natural resources between the various users that we have in a particular country? So what are there's an important day to look at what sort of milestones have we made throughout these 50 years from 1970. Various countries have enacted various environmental laws. They have come with various environmental protocols, environmental, ministries, departments, and units, all geared towards conserving the natural resources. So this day is like, what have we done? Where are we right now? And where do we want to go in the near future? So it's a great day for us to evaluate and assess what sort of achievements we have made. So today I'm very honored and then pleased to join my colleagues for us to discuss this important day. So I thank you all for joining you guys too.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. Omar Malmo, what's your take on what Omar just said?
Yeah, this is great. I think when we talk about environmental issues, dominantly, I would want to look at it from an intergenerational perspective. Like our clock is 50 years today, and if we want to look at the genesis of the Earth Day and why the subject environmental science and environmental studies came into effect, this did not actually take too long. It would have been since just the 1960s when there exist complex environmental problems in the world. The oil spills in Santa Barbara, and of course the Cootzin River in Ohio. So basically, environmental issues are due to environmental problems that existed in the 1960s, and the world is, the people in this world at the time realized that there needs multidisciplinary, people with different backgrounds come together to solve these complex environmental problems. So it is important that there is this day set aside to commemorate the Earth Day, and as well to reflect on how we have been callous and how we've been kind to the environment in which we live. So I'm very much happy to be part of this discussion. And I think as we go on, we will try to narrow it down to our situation in the Gambia. Of course, you're all not in the Gambia, but this is our country of birth. And it is
That's where we're
pathetic
going.
the way our environment is going. And it is quite unfortunate that we need more voices to speak in unison towards the realization of the Banjul Declaration of 1977, and as well other laws of the Gambia that are related to environment, disasters, and land management and agriculture. So basically what I would say is it's a day to reflect, and it's a day to look back and say, how far have we gone as Gambians, and of course as people of a sovereign nation who have domesticated such international agreements such as the EIA that began in the United States, and other environmental management laws and policies and conventions, both from the United States and internationally, that we have domesticated in our laws and in our dealing, but yet we fail in realizing our target objectives. So I think what we need to do is to reflect and, of course, set new targets and see how we can move forward as a nation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Omar, for that. Definitely, we're going to narrow this down to Gambia situation. This is just a brief intro. Famara Dampha, what do you want to add to that?
Well, first of all, let me also thank my colleagues for their intervention on that first introductory question here. I think, just like they said, today is a day of reflection. And when we reflect on exactly what was happening in the 60s and the 70s, especially in the United States, what led to the pronouncement of this day to be Earth Day in the United States, we know that if anything, we could learn from the Kuznets environmental curve, which basically explains how environment and economic growth is related, especially growth that is in the stage of industrialization of countries. Because we know that at that time in the United States, air pollution was a big problem. We know waters were already degraded or highly polluted. So those are serious problems that the United States at the time understood. And that's why the EPA was created, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and all the other environmental regulations that you talked about. So I think, if anything, today, this generation, especially countries that are at that stage of industrialization, because that is where we're seeing the biggest emissions coming from. Those are the countries at that stage of development we call the industrial stage. Now, the United States and a lot of European countries are in what they call the service economy. So they're not basically, the economy is not centered on industrialization. So today, these nations that are the middle income countries, we call them, that are at that stage of industrialization, they're the ones actually contributing a lot. I mean, if you look at their present day contribution, they are contributing a lot. So we need to learn and understand, okay, so when that decision was made and all of the reflection, all of the regulations that were put in place by those countries, what can we do as developing countries today to actually avoid some of the devastations? Because otherwise, we know that with industrialization, there is always an increase in pollutions until we reach that peaking point that Kuznets calls the peaking point. We would not see improvements in environmental quality and environmental indicators. And I think it's important that we have this conversation. So thank you very much.
So it means we are 60 or 50 years behind the rest of the world.
That's another way of putting it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, just at that point, the Chinese appear on our source and everything is going on. So I'm going to let Nfamara. So I'll be taking myself off and on to accommodate the fourth person. I think maximum we can have right now is 4. Famara Drammeh, I'll bring Famara Drammeh in. And
hello, good afternoon here. It's afternoon here. I know you guys in Europe, you guys are in Gambia. You might be in the evening now. Yeah, I want to say hello to all the the guests over here. It looks like this is a discussion between Famaras and Omar.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, actually, if you go by our traditional, all Famaras are Omar. Actually, it's just that if you go to a Mandinka community, whoever is called Famara is actually Omar. My parents call me Omar actually, but for some reason, Famara appeared in my birth certificate, so I'm going by that. So I would say thank you for all coming, Omar Saho, Omar Malmo Sambu, and of course my Tom Famara. We are all down here in the US. I'm just closing from work, so it's glad that I was able to catch up and join you guys to celebrate this important day, which is our day. Famara also already tell you the history of how this day came about. So it's all about environmental problems globally. And of course, the people in the US were so concerned because the environment was, in a horrible state, and they think people needs to have that clean environment, to clean air to breathe, and of course the animals and the biodiversity that was available in America, and then there was no laws that were protecting those animals. So based on those reasons, this day came about. So today we are all here in the midst of this COVID-19. We're talking about another global issue, which is an environmental issue. And two of these issues, obviously, they are interrelated. They are very related. And then the theme for this year, obviously, is well chosen, which is a climate action. And climate action, we all know, is one of the SDG goals, that, the world has set, to a target we set ourselves that we want to achieve, now up to 2030. So I think this is a challenge for all of us, but also is an opportunity for us to reflect and think about some of the actions we need to do individually and also as a country. And then, like Omar suggested, we need to narrow this down to our national level, where there is a lot of environmental problems going on now. And then, so we need to find out, where is the problem? Of course, we know the problem, but what measures can we take, to resolve, to make sure that we don't only talk, but we also go into action oriented and hold those, government, responsible, for all the environmental destructions we are facing today, which is a threat to our livelihood and to the health of our ecosystem. So I thank you all, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Famara, for that in-depth. So, Omar Malmo, Junior, we're going to start with deforestation, and you already mentioned the 1977 Wildlife Declaration. Right now, our
Banjul
forest,
Declaration.
Banjul Declaration. In fact, if you can just elaborate, what does that mean, and how relevant that declaration is today, today in today's context.
Thank you very much. I think the Banjul Declaration is more relevant today than it was even in 1977.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it in 1977, even though I was not born, but it's obvious to me that we do not have, the level of environmental destruction we have today. In 1977, we have now a lot of real estates getting into every part of our society, cutting down everything just to sell out. So what is really happening in Gambia now is that we do not care about environmental management and sustainability. All we care about is how much money can one put in the pocket. And even in economic development, it's obvious if you look at it from how economies grow from that agricultural level to service delivery level, like Famara did say before. We realize that there are stages, but of course stages would have to go with responsibility. So in the Banjul Declaration, where Sadauda and his government try to commit themselves and the Gambian people to protecting in a wider spectrum of our flora and fauna, I think that is much more necessary today than it was in 1977. Now, from the last time I checked, I think the Gambia has 66 forest parks or so, and of course around 23 parks, something like that. So if we intend to protect over 20% of the land area, where we have just 10,000 square meter of land and just 1,000 of water, and how far have we gone? It's like we are, instead of getting to that 20%, we are more or less actually backtracking. So it's like we are facing a lot more deforestation in this country than before. But these are different trigger factors. It's not just because people want money, but it's obvious that people have to.
Is it me, or can you hear Omar?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you go to rural Gambia, what you would understand is that most environmental resources directly.
Okay. So I'm hearing a cracking noise from Omar. Yeah, Famara,
Yes.
Dampha. I have to call the family names.
The last
Yeah,
name.
So if people in forest management.
Yeah. The challenges facing us in terms of forestry cover. I'm part of one platform, all forestry platform. This week they are disturbing pictures like Gambians going into these national parks and cutting, live trees, to go and dry them for firewood. So, what do you think are the mitigating factor? Because I think this COVID-19, what is going to happen? There are a lot of people lost their job in the hotel industry, in the travel industry, and most of them, if they can't pay their rents in the urban areas, all they're going to do is to travel back to their villages. Basically, if you're in a village, there is no job opportunity there. So what they eventually going to do, go to the forest and maybe start charcoal business or cutting these plants for lively. What do you think our government or the forestry department or environment department should do to mitigate that?
Well, thank you. I think first of all, just like you said, we have to recognize the drivers of deforestation in the Gambia. And to start with, you kind of connected to socioeconomic conditions of people, and that is obvious. In most developing countries, people rely on forest resources. That's evident. When we look at the forest ecosystem itself, we know that it has stocks of assets, right? It has ecosystem services that people benefit from, and those ecosystem services ranges from provisional services to regulatory services to what recreational services. A lot of people depend; their livelihood sources are dependent on forest resources. We have to acknowledge that, right? And that is a contributing factor. You just mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic that we are having, right? Yes, there will be loss of income. People will be, frustrated, and they would need sources of income. And part of that is to cut down trees. And is that acceptable? No. But these are the problems we see in the Gambia. We see a problem of real estate proliferation, like Omar just said. We see problems of population growth and population density. Like our population migration in the urban areas, especially where I would say the West Coast region, where most of our remaining closed and open forest sources, forest parks are. This is where we're seeing a concentration of a lot of Gambians moving to, right? So that is also a contributing factor. Commercial timber harvesting, that is also, it's been a big problem, and it still continues to be a problem. And in fact, the Gambia now, from the BBC documentary we saw, Omar told us that about 1 million trees were lost in the last 60 years in the Gambia. That is huge. Right? That's a lot of forest loss. And if you look at that in terms of the economic value of that, that's about $300 million US. That's a lot. That would have been a lot of income for the country, but some of that has been smuggled, and there is a lot of corruption that is involved also in the process. So we have institutional challenges. We have institutional weaknesses in terms of monitoring the forest resources. It is clearly stated in the forest policy that they have these problems. They mentioned that they have these problems. I think what is required is that institutional capacity should be added. The government should try to pay more attention and give more priority to the forest, the forest sector, because we need to understand the forest is linked with our well-being as a society. And the value of the forest is unfortunately not accounted, just like we account for other sectoral values into the GDP. And that lack of accounting of forest resources is the problem, because what we can't measure, it's basically hard to manage it. We cannot quantify, and we don't visualize the contribution that forest resources has in terms of promoting well-being and the welfare of people in that country. So these are serious issues, and the last chapter of my dissertation actually looks into deforestation in the region that I call the southwestern region of the Gambia, that is West Coast region, KMC, and I integrated those three regions, Banjul, West Coast, and KMC. And I look at the facts, and I have the facts and the evidence are here that shows that we've seen massive deforestation in that region. And if we look at all of the projections that I don't want to go into the details of that until maybe at some point I can give you facts on what I found using remote sensing and satellite data to kind of explain the trend of deforestation in that country. And it's serious. And we have
it's very, very serious. If we consider forest as the lungs of the earth, and we have been seeing, I think everybody is familiar what COVID-19 does to our lungs. So if we consider ourselves as the virus actually, destroying the forest, we are actually destroying our own lungs. Without forest, we can't breathe. It's going to be so hot we cannot. Omar, Saho, go ahead and where are you going to?
Well, like both Omar and Famara have mentioned, if you look at the entire documentary of the BBC one, that talks about even regional border control in the country, because he already mentioned that most of the timber that was exported to China is from Casamas region. Partly, maybe a few of them from Gambia. How porous are borders, or what sort of economic gains do Gambia have as a government? What sort of those money we get from this timber export is translated into our national economy? How do we, talk to the citizens about this information? What sort of restoration works to restore our forest cover goes back into the local community? How is the integration of the government, central government, with the CBOs, with the NGOs trying to restore the forest cover? You cannot just cut down the rosewood, you cannot just cut down the mahogany or the silk cotton tree or other trees in the country without not running a proper effective intervention. And one of the major interventions you can do at the community level is restoration projects. How do we restore the mangrove forest cover and ecosystem in the Gambia? How do we support, incentivize these community-based organizations? How do we ensure we run proper environmental education programs in our school systems? How do we ensure we run a proper monitoring and enforcement program in the country of our environmental laws? How do we ensure we strengthen and improve our environmental laws? You look at the NAME Act in the country, 1994. That does not translate to the present environmental realities in the Gambia. You look at the Gambia Environment Management Act, which was like from 1992 to 2001. We are moving far more ahead. We are talking about almost 2020 now, 19 years down the line. Things have changed. So the Gambia have to enhance, improve their environmental laws. We need to promote inter-sectorial collaboration, ministerial collaboration. We need to go back to our environmental laws. We need to go into our policies. We need to look at the environment education in the country. We need to know we account for all the natural resources in the country, from the forest cover to the marine resources to the air that we breathe. What are some of the existing laws? What are some of the existing policies? And what are some of the economic incentives we have for all these natural resources we have in the country? And do we ensure that, the amount of things we harness from all these natural resources in the country, does that translate into our development goals? And if yes, how much have we done from 1977 up to today? The number one sector in the country is tourism. Tourism depends heavily on natural resources. It's one of the pull factors that attracts every tourist in the country. How is our national parks? How is our scenic areas in the country? How is our wetlands in the country? What sort of exotic species do we have in the Gambia to push forward the Gambia tourism industry? The fisheries resources, how much are we harvesting from the marine resources? Who is taking that data? And how do we ensure the taxes that we levy on all those distant years?
Yeah, we'll come to the fishing sector. Let's concentrate on the deforestation. Famara, Drammeh, this is your area. You've been very passionate, especially the monkey park. I think that's probably the biggest blow to all lovers of environment in the Gambia, and that's what, in fact, most Gambians become aware of the environmental challenges facing us when they come and bulldoze part of that forest. Famara, what do you think are the implications of that conference center right in the middle of the only forest park in the Combos, I'll say, that's remaining around that part of the world? Famara Drive.
Yeah, thank you, Ahmed. If you look at the National Assessment Report, the Forest Assessment Report, within the last 10 years, we have lost over 97,000 hectares of forest cover in the Gambia. And they're actually due for the next assessment, which obviously the results is going to be, beyond our imagination, because we are talking about from 1997 to 2017. That was the last time the forest assessment was done. So that assessment has revealed that we have, and sorry, from 97 to 2000, actually due to do another forest assessment. So you can imagine, with all this destruction going on, including what happened in Bijula Forest, our real estate companies are doing, because those are all part of the forest cover we have, and these people are actually violating the law, and there is nobody telling these real estate companies that they need to follow the law. It doesn't matter whether even it's a shrubland or even it's a bushland, you need to go through the environmental procedures. The experts have to come and look at wherever you are building settlement, you are planning for a settlement, they need to see whether that area is conducive for settlement or not. And if there is any natural resources there that belongs to the state, need to be protected. If that project has to go, we need to make sure that those resources within the complex that you want to have your real estate is protected, and that's what we're trying to see government to protect, and they have been failing on that aspect. Now, coming to Bijula, we all know Bijula Forest Park is one of the hotspots for biodiversity conservation in the Gambia, and it's not only non-tourism, because a lot of tourists go there, but we also have researchers, students coming from universities, even our University of the Gambia students, they are using Bijula to do their research on primatology, on plants and other insects and amphibians. They do research on them, determine their population size and how threatened they are at our regional level and international level. So coming to build a conference center there, we also expect that our government is going to follow the same procedures, because they are the beneficiaries of the project. Whatever the Chinese want to do, they want to do it for the Gambia government. And they are doing it for us because they feel we can host that event. But taking the project into a state forest park without even following the procedures, because once of all, before you can do those kind of things, you have to do an environmental impact assessment. And of course, the status of the park also have to be removed, from a state being a state park to, you degazette it. But all of those procedures have not been done. To make the story short, so the Gambia has actually failed us in terms of that project, because they have destroyed, is it 14 or 7 hectares of the forest cover, and then there is no restoration plan, and then the monkeys are not put into consideration. They are now all going all over in the hotel industry looking for leftover foods. So you see, so there is no proper planning at all, and then there is no
Thank you
way that
very
we
much.
can blame apart from the government of the Gambia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Famara, for that in-depth analysis. Now we all know we have a problem. There is deforestation taking place in the Gambia, and we know we have good laws. They've not been properly implemented. We know a lot of money has been generated from our forest cover, but as Omar said, it's not being translated into our local economy. Now, Omar, Malmo, in maybe 30 seconds, what do you think now we can do? The situation is just hopeless, we should just let it go? What do you think we can do as a citizen or at government level, to make sure that we reverse this accelerated rate of deforestation? Omar Malmo. Omar Malmo seems, I hope his microphone is not mute. He probably motors. Okay, then Famara Dampha, you can go when he comes. What can we do? What can be done now to save the last remaining forest cover?
I think that's a very good point. I think we can still do something. I think we cannot let business as usual to continue, and the work that has to be done, it should be a multi-sectoral approach. Government has to be involved, and the communities have to be involved. So, which means that co-management of natural resources has been prioritized nowadays in the natural resource domain. The private sector has to also comply with the forest regulations and our environmental laws, just like Famara Manjang has said. And in the Gambia specifically, the region that I am very much particular about is the West Coast region. And I combined it with KMC to make the analysis easy, and Banjul, and I call it the southwestern region of the Gambia. And from 1985 to date, what we have seen is about 22,000 hectares of forest area that has changed to urban. Now that is significant, that's a lot. And this data, I got this data through remote sensing. We're using satellite imagery and doing remote sensing analysis of that data to understand based on GIS softwares that are used. So this is very accurate information that we have. We know this data has been collected since back in the days. And if that trend continue, the trend that we see, if that trend continue, I see a reduction of our forest cover to about 7% of the total land area in that area. Now, why is that so? Because urbanization and the way urban growth has been occurring in that area is just phenomenal. The real estate, and we have to also tie this to economic growth. Affluence, Gambians are becoming more wealthier, and there are more people becoming, I guess, more people are earning more income, and then we're seeing that triple effect occurring in terms of the expansion of the real estate industry, and that is going to be devastating for our country if we could lose all of that. The other thing that is kind of linked to it is the fact that a lot of Gambians today, everybody wants to have a home or a house in that region. And another interesting point that connects to that idea is the fact that the Gambia, I'm sure at some point before 2050, we will identify a site to be the next capital city of the country. And so one analysis that I did basically asked Gambians, over 500 Gambians, to tell me where they think our next capital city should be located. I guess you all know the answer. Over 52% of Gambians said the West Coast region. We have to think about the implication of that. If that is the will of the government, the will of the people, the preference of the people, then the government has to do something, come up with serious regulations to kind of preserve and protect some areas. Now, if you look at the official forest record we have, from the recent environmental compendium from that they just put together at the Gambia Bureau of Statistics, it is clearly only 2.3% of the land area in that study area that I just mentioned has that official forest recognition. And that is not just the entire forest cover that we have there. Now, forest cover can be defined to include grassland. It can be, in the Gambia, they define it to include grassland and open forest area. We have a lot of open forest area in the region, so which is about 3.3% of the total land area. And that area is not protected. It's not even on the records. So if you look at remote sense data, you see that that area is not even recorded. The officials are not even mentioning those as protected or forest reserves that we have. So I am proposing that the government should reserve the 3.3% of the land area to be protected as forest areas in that country. And I think that's going to help. The other component of it has to do with payments for ecosystem services. We have to recognize that, just like from the introduction we said, people need income. Their livelihood sources are highly dependent on forest resources, whether it's domestic timber production or commercial timber production or other kinds of activities that people have through their interaction with forest. So we have to be able to provide some financial incentives to the owners of this forest area, which is also loosely defined in the Gambia. If you look at the land governance assessment that was done by Ben and others, basically we don't have a clear definition of who owns what. Some of these forest areas are claimed to be community forest areas, and then government, there are laws that says that if the government needs the area for anything, the government can just come and take it. But essentially what we need is to recognize who has the property rights over those areas and be able to provide some financial incentives so that they can get their livelihood sources through that mean, and they can help in the co-management of the natural resource, which is our forest ecosystem in the Gambia. And that is going to help us. It's going to help us in many ways. In carbon sequestration, it's going to help us in flood mitigation. It's going to help us as a country. That area is becoming more urbanized. There'll be more urban heat island effects, and that is going to be devastating in terms of the health implications that it has. So I think that we need to provide those payments of ecosystem services to be able to provide financial incentives for people. The other component that I just want to mention is the area of green infrastructure as part of the forest ecosystem as a whole. Now, green infrastructure are nature-based solutions. Usually people use like street trees and stuff like that. I have seen KMC doing things like that. That is phenomenal. That is very important. If you look at the way the urban area is, it's not planned. There are no stormwater infrastructure systems there, which means that if it rains, high precipitation, a lot of places are flooded. If we could try to integrate green infrastructure solutions, those nature-based solutions, we can increase percolation and infiltration rate in the area, which means that we will reduce the flood risk that the area will be prone to. We don't need concrete everywhere. We just need to urbanize and put more green structures everywhere, and that is going to also help us in terms of dealing with air pollution, because they're going to help us in that angle as well. So those are areas I think that policy has to be driven towards that, and it has to be based on the science. It has to be based on our understanding of our ecosystem and our urban areas. But who cares about what we do as researchers? Policymakers are just doing what they do, and that is very
Thank you very much, Famara Dampha. I'm not sure if Omar, can you hear me, Omar Malmo?
Yes, I'm following. I'm hearing everything.
Okay, so we are talking about solutions. Now we know we have problems. We know our forest cover is disappearing, and we have good laws, but they're not being implemented. And we know a lot of money from that Omar Fofana's report is being generated. But where is it all going? So what do you think? What are the solutions now we can do to reverse this dangerous trend Gambia is embarked on?
Yes, rightly and frankly, I followed all that Famara said, and those are just quite obvious reasons why we are having serious problems in terms of deforestation, socioeconomic issues. But I think the lead issue here is corruption. To be very honest with you, the ordinary Gambian is not cutting down the forest to go and sell it, to China. Now, these are done by our government officials, the police, those that we even employ at the forestry department, those we employ at our environment ministries. They are aiding and abetting, in this whole process. So the problem in the Gambia is corruption and having people. Do I consider it to be institutional inefficiency or probably institutional biases? So I think dominantly our problem are mostly our own people. And to solve that, it's difficult to get genuine and honest people to work in our government institutions. Because I cannot imagine if we are smuggling thousands and thousands of timber from Senegal, how are we smuggling them into the Gambia? If the Gambia is probably, or let's say we have banned timber, timber cutting or timber logging, how comes we are one of the 5 most exporters of timber in our sub-region? It's quite ironical. So I think the solution is not policies or it's not laws. We have the laws quite well written and good. The NEMA Act is under review. So we will write very good literatures, researchers will do very good and fine researches, but the implementers will do no implementation. And the implementation relies mostly on the executive and of course, those at the helm of affairs. So I think my only solution would be probably we need to have an environmental party that will lead and change the narratives in this country, but not the officials that we have. I do not trust any of those. So I think my problem is not the laws. My problem is not the conventions we sign and domesticate. My problem is corruption and having officials who do not have environment at heart, yet they work at environment and they are masterminding the corruption and the looting of our environmental resources on a daily basis.
Yeah, that is rather unfortunate, but I think this is something nobody can dispute. These are the hard facts. So probably when the Damphas and the Famara Drammeh decided to take the plunge and get back to Gambia, we can nominate one of them, to have the Green Party. Omar Saho, what do you think are the solutions? And
Well,
after
it can better be said on, both of my colleagues, Famara and Omar. I think that's the whole thing. Number one, from corruption. Number two is from refuting what scientific data or the evidence are trying to produce, so that at least we can have that, science policy interface, whereby the scientific research is here, the database is here, and have the policy interface here, and we can drive in our policy and development agendas. Like Omar and Famara mentioned, we need to at least we have urban landscaping in our country. We cannot cut down all the trees. The government has to come with laws and policies whereby certain territories, certain kind of kilometers or miles from the roadside, supposed to be like government areas, we can put trees down there, we can beautify those areas down there. We need to make sure we have proper permitting system before you cut down a tree in the Gambia. What are some of the protocols you have to follow for you to get the license? And if you get the license here, what are the protocol? What kind of tree size do you cut? What dimension? We need to make sure we look at all those cuts in the country and make sure people follow those due processes down there. Getting back to corruption in the country, getting back to government officials. If a particular institution is very inefficient of executing their duty, this is where I have to have the parliament or the executive, the office of the president have to come down there. There's a lot of environment problems in the country. NEA, for example, or Ministry of Environment is the one responsible. What have they done so far since they came to power? Or since
finally on this topic, Famara, what are your solutions? But I think we should remind ourselves there was a land commission, which was launched. What happened to it? Do anybody know anything? Omar, you are in the Gambia. Do you know anything about the land commission?
Our problem is not having the good, thoughts and having the good stuff on paper, but implementation is our problem. Commissions yet, but how far have we gone? We have gone nowhere. So it's like we just put things on a paper and then they look very beautiful, but at implementation we are still at zero. So in terms of environmental management, we're still at a standstill. Nothing is happening. So it's like the all other is still on.
And that's rather unfortunate. Famara Drammeh, what do you think can get us out of this, or we can reverse this dangerous trend? Because the path we took is leading to self-destruction. So how do you think we can reverse this? Famara Drammeh.
I think we have beautiful laws, but we are very weak in enforcing the laws, because the laws are there to be enforced. And this is why, when we make up a Biodiversity Act, we come up with a Forest Act. And then these acts have, developed, by the government. A lot of resources have gone into developing those acts, and they went into the National Assembly, to get it ratified. So these are laws that we should not play with. There is no point in making laws if you cannot enforce them. And I think enforcement is our weakness here in the Gambia, and that's what the problem is. This is why we are losing so many of our wildlife. We are losing a lot of our forest cover. People are indiscriminately dumping. But in the law, if you go there, it says anybody who indiscriminately dumps, this is what you need to pay. You know, we talk about this, you know, Biodiversity Act. We talked about the Forest Act. You know, we talk about pollution control. The NEMA is very clear that nobody build hotels within, you know, from the 100 meters or 150 meters from the high water marks. But we are seeing this is happening. And sometimes it is happened by the government institutions that you expect them to understand and know the laws. So there is no coordination between government institutions, and then we are also very weak in enforcing the law. Because if the law said this, let's take Gunjur, for example. You know, Golden List was dragged for, you know, 4 counts of environmental violation. You know, for example, I know we're not talking about fisheries now, but I'm just saying that, you know, we have to enforce the law. Anybody that breaks the law must face the law. You know, and this is why we are determined that whatever happened in, you know, in Bijilo Forest Park must be compensated. You know, government has failed us. And then we have all right to come out in 2022 before the conference starts to make a massive demonstration to ensure that that place is protected. What deserves to be there needs to be built, because the place doesn't even have a good information, you know, a center. You know, visitors information center. You cannot even get a good information
Famara,
that you need of that.
Thank you for
in short,
to our next topic. We have like
absolutely,
4
law
people. I know, I'm not
enforcement
sure where
and
Famara Dampha is from, but 4 coastal people. Our next topic is about coastal pollution.
Just
Can you
one
hear me?
comment here. What Famara is saying, we understand that in the Gambia, we have the laws. But the people who are like, you know, responsible, like, you know, law enforcement need to know, you know, what the difference between politics, partisan politics, and as well as implementing the laws we have in the country here. We cannot have align yourself to a particular political party or a political leader in the country, and then you fail in your national duty. This is what you have to understand in the Gambia. That is one thing. We want to have land trust, land conservation in the country. That need to look at all these land problems we have in the Gambia. And then we don't know that laws in the Gambia are more powerful than the people implementing those laws. But in the Gambia, you have government officials who are even more powerful than the laws we have in the Gambia. This is certain.
One point.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just 1 minute. I just want to recognize the importance of forests in terms of climate change mitigation. And I think to conclude our discussion without touching on that, that will make me a little sad. I think people need to understand the Gambia, before 2000, our forests used to sequester a lot of carbon. We had our net benefit was really positive. In other words, we are gaining a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. After 2000, our forest resources are emitting carbon into the atmosphere because of what? Deforestation. Because the forest biomass, that about 80 to 90, some will say 90% of the biomass is carbon. So once you cut down that tree, you're releasing all of this forest, all of this carbon into the atmosphere. And that is not going to help us in dealing with you know, climate change, particularly when it comes to sequestration of carbon. And there are economic incentives, there are economic benefits, there are economic loss associated with carbon release into the atmosphere through deforestation. And once you quantify that, how much if you look at the social cost of carbon and put that monetary value on the loss of CO2 that is going out there, we as a country, we are losing a lot of money. So it is also important for people to think about the forest as something, as an ecosystem that helps us in dealing with climate change impacts. And I just don't want to go into details, but that's a very important component of this discussion.
Thank you very much. Our next topic is coastal pollution. Famara, you know, before you conclude, you mentioned about building hotel 100 meters from high water marks. But now we have seen 3 fish meal factories just 12 meters from the high water mark. So and we are seeing these you know, marine turtles, you know, big mammals, you know, floating all over the place. So first we start with this, and we start with Famara. You know, we have serious problem with pollution in our waters. What do you think we are responsible, and what we can do to make sure that it is respected? Because Chinese now are directly pumping their waste into our oceans, and you know that is something I think is against the NEMA Act. You can elaborate on that, please.
I'm not sure if I can understand you well because you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, sorry about that.
So,
can you hear me now? Where's the noise coming from? I will mute for now.
Understand the question very well.
Yeah, what I was saying before you conclude, you can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Before I
Hello?
conclude,
Hello, can you hear me
hello,
now?
hello.
Hello, yes, I can hear you clearly.
Let me change my direction. I'm charging my phone. That's why I'm getting close to this side. Ahmed,
Okay.
repeat your question. I didn't get that very well.
Huh? So you think it's me here? Okay.
Just
Omar Marmo, can you hear me, Omar Marmo?
Yes, I can. I think my dogs are making some noise here.
Okay, I don't know
I'm not
where
sure
they
if you
want
can
to.
hear me.
Yeah, okay. So before Famara come
Yes,
back, what I was
I can
talking
hear
about.
you. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. What I was saying before Famara comes back, before he sort out his phone, what I was talking about was that our next topic is coastal pollution. Recently, we have a lot of problem with this in the Gambia. And before Famara conclude, he mentioned about, according to the name, nobody should build a hotel or whatever, a physical structure, 100 meters from the high water mark. But in the West Coast region,
150, 150.
150. In Gunjur, Katong, and Sanyang, we have seen these fish meal factories just 12 meters from the high water park, high
Yeah.
water mark. You know how, you know, what's your take on this? You know, the level of pollution on our seas and our environmental department. You know, what do you think? You know, we
Yeah,
can do to
because
reverse?
I think Golden Lead, the way from the very beginning, did not follow the environmental laws. Because if at all they have contacted NEA when they were building that factory, that issue would have been come into discussion. That obviously where you want to choose the factory to be built is very close to the water body, and then they should not have even accepted that in the first place. And then so those are some of the reasons why we say Golden Lead from the very onset, they didn't follow the laws because where the factory is even established, or located is very wrong. It's between Bolonfeño and then the water, the marine ecosystem. So you
Yeah, I
see,
know.
I mean, there is no way you can environmentally allow that company to even be established there. So that's one of the things. But also some of the projects that are coming, especially hotels. I mean, they're coming through Ministry of Tourism, and sometimes most of the time they don't even involve Ministry of Environment in this because I mean there are politicians who wants to impress the government that they are bringing in more investors to the country, who wants to build, who wants to invest in the tourism sector. So in their view, that is a very important project. They don't even need to waste their time to let the Ministry of Environment know, much more to hear their views. So most of the time they break in the law, and then maybe the Ministry of Environment found themselves in a situation where they cannot even enforce the law, because if they are not informed and they came to know about it, NEA have all the powers to stop them, from developing where they should not have been. So, but sometimes, like I said, people are not enforcing the law, for some reason, because either those projects are connected to somebody up there, high, high up there, or maybe, people don't want to enforce the law. I don't know, but that's our big problem. We're not enforcing the law. We're good in making laws, rectifying them, and we say we have nice policies and nice acts, but they are not being enforced.
Yeah, Omar Malmo, can you hear me once again?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Yeah, so we are talking about postal pollution. You know, Gambia have issues with solid waste, and we're supposed to be plastic free, but there is still plastic flying all over the place. You know, what do you think we can do to reverse the level of coastal pollutions we are seeing all over the Gambia, from Banjul to Khartoum?
I think with the
Or
coastal pollution, I think all of us need to join hands. All of us need to join hands and fight for NEA to be completely autonomous. I think if NEA is probably ensure they on counts and then take them to court, and the executive, or for whatever reason I do not know, would just ask you to get off with that case. Problem, and I didn't lead to court. How far have we gone in that case? It's been 2 years. So I think our environment and marine pollution dominantly is due to, not doing the right environmental impact assessment, or probably we just try to make up cook and bull stories to ensure we give license to companies to operate against our environmental laws, or probably there is executive interference in the implementation or actually giving documents to such factories. Like Famara said, the laws are very clear. I do not have any problem with the laws in the Gambia, but the enforcement is the problem. So if NEA is not completely autonomous, then we like animaniga so NEA is at that level where they would actually, charge people for doing wrong, and the executive would say no, probably we can go behind the table and our employees of the.
Yeah, and Omar, just I think a clear example of that was when Famara mentioned it. NEA actually dragged Golden Lead to court, and Dr. Isa Tuture intervened, broad daylight, and the matter was announced that it was actually settled out of court when it was never settled out of court. Actually, NEA refused to settle the matter, to withdraw the case. They asked Dr. Isa Tuture to come with a written statement that he wants this matter to be withdrawn from the court. She refused, but the announcement went ahead anyway. Going to Omar Saho, you grew up in Gunjur. We've seen that that beach side in a good times. Recently there have been number of marine life, been floated all over the place. That ones. What do you think is responsible, and what can we do to?
No, the main responsibility is from, other than the policy aspect of it, is the marine resources we have in the Gambia. Because if you look at the location of the Gambia have about 200 nautical miles of economic exclusive zone. It's the most richest fishing zone in West Africa. That's on the western part of it. But from the northern part to the southern part, of 30 nautical miles of economic exclusive zone. You talk about pelagic fish, you talk about like the migratory pattern of dolphins and whales, and sea turtles around that area. This is what we are blessed with. But who is monitoring that coastline? Who is enforcing those laws? Who is ensuring that at least the fish meal in Carton, in Sanya, in Gunjur, we are able to sample the air quality, that the quality of the air that are emitted into the air, into the air that people are breathing, the emission. Yeah, the water that they are pumping into the water, who is taking that water sample to look at the quality of the particular water that they are pumping into the Gambian water? You look at like over harvesting of the fish resources, because if all these fishing boats from Casamance or from Senegal to Gambia, all of them go into the water, the main problem is there's kind of harvesting, and we don't have the necessary infrastructure in the country. Once the fish factories in the Gambia cannot consume them, they end up dumping that water, the fish back into the water. How do we ensure that yes, we have the proper infrastructure in the country that can be able to support the fish that is being caught along the coastline of the Gambia? If you look at the poverty reduction strategy of the Gambia, they have this, cross-border agreement. Gambia and Senegal having a partnership whereby the fishermen in the Gambia can go to the Gambian water, the Senegal fishermen can come to the Gambian water. We want to review those agreements. Some of those things are not sustainable.
Yeah. Okay, Omar, thank you very much for throwing light. Finally, on Famara Dampha. Famara, we have serious real problem with coastal pollutions. What do you think are the drivers of this, and what can we do to stop it or make it a little bit better?
I'll try to answer the last question. What we can do. First of all, I try to put a lot of emphasis on valuation of these ecosystem services. And We know that the coastline has enormous coastal ecosystem services. Go there on Sunday and see how many Gambians are out there enjoying themselves. So there are those recreational benefits. And we seem to think that the tourism industry has been benefiting tourists who are coming, international tourists coming. But Gambia, there are local tourists. People go with their families all the time to these beach sites and they enjoy themselves. And when I was in the Gambia in 2018, I did a study on valuation and how Gambians can appreciate the coastline they have. And you will be surprised with the results. Some of my professors are like, I couldn't imagine that. Well, people are saying this. I'm saying, yes, because this is the value that people attach to the resource that they have, regardless of the metrics that you use. Because in that type of, in contingent evaluation studies, often we see in other places thinking that communities or poor nations do not have the economic incentive. They don't have the capital. They are restrained when it comes to income. So they don't offer a lot when it comes to their willingness to pay for coastal protection. But it was the opposite I saw in the Gambia. Gambians are telling me that, you know what, we are willing to pay a lot of our income to be able to protect our coastline. So we need to understand, the policymakers need to understand that first Gambians value the coastline. And we see that evidently, we see that from empirical studies. And the other component of it is Gambians even said that they are willing to participate in terms of their willingness to work. We see how many civil society organizations we've seen taking action, from Ozone Heroes to Clean Up Gambia to Help Gambia. We see all these environmental movements going out, on Sundays or during the weekends to go and clean up our beach area. So that willingness, that is a monetary, if you monetize the work that is being done by those groups, it's a lot of contribution to the well-being of that country. So we have to understand that these resources are valued and we shouldn't take them for granted. And we should not always talk about the coastline only from the international tourist perspective. That is important, it is significant. But if you look at the tourism's contribution, a holistic approach in assessing the value of the tourism sector, we exclude a lot of the ecosystem services that the area provides. And that is why we always underestimate. When I hear people say tourism is about 15 to some say about 18% of GDP, I'm like, that's an underestimation. Do we account for the swimmings and all of the picnics that we do there? Does the beach ask us to pay for something? If you have to do that in a hotel, they will ask you to pay. We go there on a Sunday with our families and ourselves. So that has to be understood. And we need to know Gambians value and Gambians are willing to contribute, whether through income, through their own monies, or through labor to provide the necessary solutions that are needed to clean up the beach area. And we have to stand strong when we come to the recommendation, especially from a civil society perspective. These are some of the things that we need to advocate, and we need to have a strong civil society environmental movement, a movement that cannot be imagined in any other country. And Gambia should be seen as a model, because I think that we have the people who are very passionate about these issues.
It's a question of those who are passionate and have the ideas don't have any powers. Those who have the powers have no ideas and they are not passionate about the environment. So this is Famara, Dampha. Now what we're going to do, we are running out of time, but I don't want us to miss all the what Omar Saho jot down here. So Omar Saho will talk in 2 minutes about sand mining, the impact it has in our environment, and Famara Dampha about climate change, and Omar Malmo, you will talk about all these environmental problems and our local livelihood and food insecurity. Then Famara will talk. Famara Drammeh will talk about environmental laws in 2 minutes, and I will take less than 2 minutes to talk about zoonosis. Zoonosis these are the kind of infection like virus, bacteria, or fungi that can jump from from animals to human beings. And these current pandemics, as you all know already, it jumped from bat or snake. That is still not confirmed. It's possible the snake got it from the bat and transferred it into human, or directly from the bat into human beings. And already there are a lot of research which buttress this, because they take these virus from the bat and sequence them and compare it with these circulating coronavirus we are having, and there is almost more than 89% sequence identity. So, but this is not the first corona we have. In fact, the first pandemic in this century century is corona in SARS. I think you all remember 2002 when we have this severe acute respiratory syndrome, which also emerged from the same part of the world in 2002. In 2012, we have a similar corona outbreak which started in Saudi Arabia. It's called MERS. This is also from the animals. So basically, what is happening? Our interface between us and the wildlife is been broken. In fact, Umar sent me a very, very interesting article. I think you should send it to all of these guys. They probably have.
Yes.
During these lockdowns, you see animals appearing. This is a wild animal in the streets of New York. In the street of Mumbai. You see exotic birds. Right in the middle of Miami Beach. It's just unbelievable how we are pressing these wildlife to the edges. So these are the situations we have. Even these big cities, they should have at least the lungs, the forest within the middle. I think this is one area. I'm not sure how New York is, but London, you can drive like an hour into a forest inside central London. That's the Regent Park. It's just unbelievable. You will be driving, you see these gazelles, you see different type of wild animal. And I think England, they do that very, very well, more than most of these. I can say Europe in general, they do that very well. And we can replicate the same thing in the Gambia. We are faced with serious problem. And as we continue on this rate, this interface is going to get thinner and thinner, and our interaction with these wild animals is going to increase. And increasingly, we're going to see more and more pandemics, these situations. So I'm going to go to Omar Malmo. Can you hear me again?
Very well, yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yeah, so environmental insecurity and local livelihood, and our food security. How can you link these three? Local livelihood. For example, we've seen how Golden Lead and these fish meal factories are over exploiting the natural resources that serve as the source and cheapest source of protein for most Gambians. But now, because of the presence of these fish mills, the price is beyond the means of most locals. What's your take on that? In 2 minutes. Hello? Hello? Okay, so we go to Omar Saho, sand mining.
Okay, sand mining, if somebody who knows about the geology of the Gambia, look at from Badakunku, Sanyan, Tuyereng, and Kartong, this place is heavily mined, because Badakunku, Sanyan area, they have the zircon down there, just have the silk sand and emanite. These are natural resources. We're talking about black sand from Sanyan being put in the containers. Who knows where those sands are going and how much do they account in the national budget? Who is permitting the mining of sand in that particular area? Do they conduct any environmental impact assessment? Do they conduct any environment and social impact assessment in that area? How is sand mining impacting the local vegetable gardens in this part of the region? What zone? Is there any buffer zone? How many dimensions, how many meters of buffer zone is left between the high tide of the ocean to the sand mining area? If you talk about Gunjur area, there is even less than 15 meters from the sand mining edge to the high tide of the ocean. So which means if there's any sea level rise in Gunjur, the entire sand mining area, those open pits are going to fill with coastal water. So which means right now, the livelihood of the Gambian people is at risk of those coastal communities. Number one, before they implement sand mining in this area, Gunjur, Sanyan, Kadam, Badakunku, all these places are like in uplands, whereby women in this area use those areas as their rice paddy. They also use those places in the dry season as their vegetable gardens. So if they mine the entire area, which means the livelihood of these local women is seriously undermined. It's undermined, yes. And then this is also going to subject these rural farmers in this part of the country into food insecurity, because the rice that they cultivate in that area is what they harvest and subsidize family expenditure at home level.
Yeah, Omar, thank you very much. But you mentioned we know the problem and it's evident. Nobody can deny that. But if you speak to Gambians about the impact of sand mining, they will tell you, but we have to build our houses. Is there any other solution?
Yes, there are solutions. If you look at places like Ghana, some parts of Nigeria, they are not no more using sand right now. They use compressed art blocks. So Gambia also, we have like hills in the hinterland of the country. Let's go down the hills, promote innovative technology whereby we can make construction out of it. Because sand is going to go out of Gambia. We're going to run out of sand in the Gambia. The only place we are mining sand is the coastal area. If there is no longer sand in this area, how are we going to build our houses, our buildings? How are we going to fence our compounds? So which means right now we have to focus too much research about innovative technology. How can we make compressed art blocks? How can we make eco-friendly blocks in the Gambia that can be used to build our houses?
Yeah.
How can we run a dual reclamation in the country?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Like compressed sand art is another option that Gambia should think about. Famara Dampha, finally to you, climate change. When you mention climate change to Gambians, even politicians, they say, well, it's like our old friend Donald Trump will tell you it's all fake. What will you tell these people about climate change?
Well, the evidence on the science of climate change is indisputable today, and even in the business industry or the private sector is the biggest contributor when it comes to climate financing. And even the private sector understands that climate is becoming an economic issue. There are a lot of if you look at the economics of climate change, there are lots of benefits that we drive. But what I want to focus to talk about for Gambians and policymakers who are listening is probably one of the biggest threat to the Gambian nation when it comes to climate change is rising sea levels. And my Famara Drammeh has done an excellent work in this area, and credit to him. But we know what it means for a rising sea level when it comes to the capital city. We have the only capital city, right? That is one of the most important communities that we have in that country. A lot of institutions are concentrated there, but what have we seen? We have seen a reaction, population moving out. It's the only region in the country where we see population net migration be negative, meaning that about 35,000 Banjulians left Banjul in the last few decades. That is significant. That's a lot of people. What is the trigger? The trigger could not be economics. If you look at the theories of migration, we understand that people live mainly for economic reasons. Who in the Gambia will tell you that Banjul has the poorest economic or socioeconomic conditions? No, Banjul is the best when it comes to poverty poverty rates, in terms of the lowest when it comes to poverty rates. So I think from the work that I did there and did the correlation, we understand that environmental and climate-related factors are the triggering or the influential drivers of out-migration from Banjul, and that is significant. What is the signal? The signal already studies how. I just want to conclude by saying we know from Famara study, we know from Bujalo study, we know from different studies that we need to move the capital. But before we move the capital, because we're a developing country, we can't just move the capital like that. We have to protect it in the medium term, right? By 2050. But in the long term, we need to move the capital. And that has to be something the government is taking seriously in terms of finance and thinking about, because it requires a lot of resources, a lot of issues to be able to identify the location in the first place. I was able to do some analysis, preliminary analysis, to show which location would be most strategic when we are to build a next capital city. But Gambians told me that we want the capital city to be in the West Coast region. So what does that mean when it comes to the forest cover in that region? So essentially, to conclude on this point, we have to be very, very serious about this. And climate change is a hoax. It's just it's unfortunate if anyone is thinking.
Yeah, thank you very much, Famara. Now that will be the final segment of this. Famara, Gambia environmental laws. Do you have anything to fold them, but you already admitted that there is not much to fold them, but it's about implementation. What can we do to make sure these laws are implemented? Famara Drammeh.
Very good. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Gambia is one of those countries in Africa with a very beautiful environmental laws. And we have seen some countries in the sub-region, they even contacted our experts to help them to have their national biodiversity strategy and action plan, for example. A country like Sierra Leone, when they came out of the war, Gambia is one of those who participated in drafting their environmental laws. We have very good environmentalists in the past generation. So we have very good environmental laws. Like I said, our institutions are very weak. and then we don't enforce our laws, and then our government systems or our government bodies are not coordinating. They are not coordinating well. We don't have an integrated natural resource policy whereby all the institutions will interact, coordinate or collaborate when it comes to enforcing these laws, because some of these laws are very much interrelated. So these are some of the things that we need to very much think about. Of course, my Famara mentioned about the climate change. Climate change is real. And then looking at the theme for this day, which is climate action. One of the targets for the climate action is to integrate climate change into our national policies. One of the targets for the action of that. And then thank God we have the EU Global Climate Change project in the Gambia, which I started before I came to the US. I think I only served in about 6 months of that project. But today now we have our Gambia National Climate Policy. And that policy needs to be really understood by all the institutions. And we need to make sure that it is mainstream in most of the government institutions. Climate change needs to incorporate. We need to mainstream climate change in our national policies, because it is something that is affecting all key sectors of our economy. Whether it's agriculture, transportation, fisheries, forestry, biodiversity, everything. So we need to make sure that our national climate change policy is well, understood, and then we ensure that all the natural resource sectors mainstream this climate thing, And then finally, to give like environmental pollution. I mean, I'm beginning to understand how waste management is the very important aspect of waste management, because my new job right now, I'm working in a waste treatment facility. So there is no way, in any civilized world where that golden lead can operate. If you're looking at what they are doing right now, channeling that pipe into the water, it's one of the disaster in our history. Nobody, no civilized world will do that. No, where I'm actually working, all these treatment facilities, we are testing the water temperature, the biological, oxygen in all
the biological oxygen,
the alkalinity. We have to do all these tests before a water is treated, and when it is finally treated, the effluent, we even have to test all this effluent to make sure they are free from microorganisms.
Famara,
and then you're thinking about gold, actually, disposing the waste or raw material in the water.
Thank you very much. What is happening in Gunjur is rather unfortunate, and I think we'll stop it by force or whatever. Omar Malmo, thank you very much for coming back again. This is your final segment, like climate change, local livelihood, and food insecurity. What's your take on that?
Yeah, let's say at the heat of this disaster, which is COVID-19, that is what I refer to as the normal functioning of society is obstructed. Therefore, everybody is expected to stay at home. Now, let's come down to the coastal communities. Most of the people in these coastal communities, women and children and young people, actually get most of their livelihoods from either the coast or from, little agriculture, horticultural production that people do. Now, you realize that even the existence of factories, in one way or the other, support, the sustenance of people. Now, but comparatively, if we look at the environmental damage that it causes and the economic benefit that people derive from it, the environmental damages will outweigh, and the unsustainable, exploitation of our marine resources. So livelihood in one way or the other will be affected. But of course, sustainability has to do with, let's maintain life and ensure that our environment is also safe from pollution and, of course, destruction. So when we talk about livelihood and sustainability in this regard, I think the Gambia needs to have ecoton laws. Now, ecoton, what I mean by that is environmentally, when we refer to something as an ecoton, it's like a gap between two ecosystems, like the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystem. There should be that buffer in between these two ecosystems that prevents, certain eventualities that might happen if disasters occur. Probably if you go down to the Monkey Park, which was in between the two ecosystems, was actually in one way or the other controlling erosion at a certain level. But if you destroy that ecology that has over 5,000 or 500 lives of different species, what signal are you sending to the people?
Yeah.
So generally, is people, and of course, people are getting their livelihoods in that place through the tourism industry. There are people working for forestry in that department. There are people who are actually bird watchers in that area. So of course, if you come down to the other side where you have people around the beach who are selling their petty trading, other people work in these factories, other people are involved in the fishing sector. If our marine resources are completely polluted, then there will be nobody on our coastline. So livelihoods will be significantly affected. And what is happening if the Chinese are exporting 960, thousand bags of fish meal to China, on an yearly basis? In the next 5 years, the Gambian fishmonger will have nothing to sell in our market, and we will have nothing to feed on.
Yeah, that's
so
a
that
fact.
means the life and livelihood of the poor and the most vulnerable members of society would continue to be, highly affected. So of course, there are two aspects of it: the socioeconomic benefit that the people are driving, that we need to actually put on a balance in between the socioeconomic benefits and the environmental pollution and environmental impacts it is having. And obviously, the environmental impacts are way more unsustainable, compared to the benefit that few individuals are getting. So I think in Gunjur, the fact is, let me be honest with you, in Gunjur, the problem is not the government, but of course the people of Gunjur. A minister told me this, that the people of Gunjur went to him to say, we like this factory, when other people are out there fighting tooth and nail to ensure that the right things are done. So I think even people in our communities are the problems, in our fight for sustainable development. So
Omar, that is true. Nothing is far from the truth. You still have one 30-second contribution to do. That my question is, the theme for this year is climate action. If you have one climate action plan, if they give you one choice to do that you can implement as your climate action, what would it be? But before that, I will read a couple of comments from here for you to hear. There are people commenting. This Noah Boyan, I think is Secretarian. He said, "Oh, Kuzurians, Gambian is proud of you forever. You gave away to success." But Femi Mahoney said, "They give needs to." The given need to reduce the number of estate agents. What happened to the Land Commission, which was launched by the government last year under the leadership of Justice Raymond Sock? And the same commentator again, Femi Mahoney, said it is too easy for families to be selling their customary lands. My own clan is guilty of this many times in Gunjur, and someone done not even long time ago. It's very sad. I tried to speak to them, but they wouldn't understand. And Femi Mahoney also said, you go to the coastal road, all you see is capitalists like tough building and fencing all the lands all over the place. And he also went on to say the destruction of Bijulop Forest Park, just to put a lump of building, is one of the biggest treasons ever. I think I will agree with this time I'm going to give a chance to myself first. If I have one climate action plan, I will close all fish milk factories around the Congo coast. They are not sustainable. They are perennial polluters, and dumping their waste into their ocean is the biggest insult as African we can tolerate in our land. Omar Malmo, you are right. Some of the locals will do that, but Gambia have laws. Gambia have laws. Why the government didn't implement those laws? The factory where it is located is right in the middle of the community. If you go to the factory or in Brazil, nobody should build a factory there. And if you come to Nema in itself, 100 to the high water marks, these are all 12 meters from the sea. So Gambia have laws, let them be implemented. Let us not allow foreign nationals or help them abuse our own laws. So if I have one climate action plan, I will close all fish mill factories. Famara Dampha, what will you take?
One action plan in the Gambia, I think I would advocate for a sustainable solution to kind of work towards having a new capital city for that country.
Thank you. Omar, Malmo?
Am I back on? Okay, great.
Yes,
yeah. If actually I have one thing on climate action, probably is I would just get off James Gomez and his permanent secretary from that ministry. Honestly.
That would have been my second choice. Famara Drammeh. Famara Drammeh.
The climate action will be reducing pollution now. Waste pollution, because it's deteriorating our health right now. Many people are getting sick in Gambia because we are drinking from very polluted waters. Because the wastewater is coming from our houses, and the wastewater is coming from industries are not being treated. They are not being channeled properly, and they have been infiltrated into our water bodies, and also our aquifers are being polluted. So this is why people getting very sick in Gambia. You see a lot of people asking for help to go for treatment abroad. So I think our environment is so polluted, especially the water component of it. Because once a water is dirty, you drink it, you can get sick at any time. You know hepatitis B and C. You know them, Ahmed. I mean, if you can get those from the polluted waters, and this is what is killing Gambia right now. Very action-oriented, because one, everybody is digging boreholes, and also they're digging, all of these wells and whatever. But we don't go into the water resources, guidelines. Nobody even get permission from water resources to drill a borehole. And then people are digging soakaways anyhow they want, and maybe they are not even following the right standard of building soakaways. So all of these, our public latrines, they are not being done properly, and then sometimes we dig even up to the water table. So this means that our water table is exposed to pollution. And then some of us in the village, we don't have running water from nowhere. You have to rely on a drinking well. So if you live in an environment where people waste are not being treated, or they are not being controlled, just to make sure that they are not being, our water bodies are safe. We drink it from this water, and in the next minute, I mean, you're getting sick. You don't know where the sickness is coming from. People are getting amputated. You don't know where they're getting amputated. People are seeking for treatment. Within these few years, you see a lot of people getting sick. It's because our environment is dirty. And then politicians don't know that. They always think. Yesterday, I saw Yunus Hydra saying he engaged lawyer Dabo, and they say their priorities are education, agriculture, and health. But I told him that without environmental sustainability, some of these priorities that you guys highlight as your party's political or agenda, it might not even work, because environment is all connected to environment. If you don't have a good water, drinking water, how can you meet your health targets? You can't. When the environment is polluted, agriculture will not do well. Fisheries will not do well. So we forget about environment. I think we need to put this into our politicians. Whichever you guys, maybe some of you guys need to start forming a political party, or get into a political party where they understand, because environmental is ignorance in most of these political parties. People don't know what's going on.
Famara, we give it to Omar Saho quickly.
No. Okay. On a final note, I think every average Gambian is supposed to plant a tree. We have about 2 million people. If these 2 million people in the Gambia plant a tree, and we ensure that all those trees are survived of the maturity, that is going to at least restore the forest cover of the country. We talk about the laws, we talk about the policy dimensions, we talk about evacuating all these Chinese investors in the country. So the other thing will be like ensure a nationwide tree planting program to minimize the rate of deforestation, minimize the rate of wild bushfire in the country, and as well as natural hazards that come from climate change, just like windstorms.
Finally, what I will say, I would first want to say thank you very much for taking your time. I supposed to be 1 hour, but we can go for I don't know how many hours. And I know some of you are very, very busy. You are writing a thesis, which takes a lot of works, and Famara also is very busy. But we cannot underestimate what we are doing, the impact we are having on the young generation. When Danny Hayes started this World Arts Day 50 years ago, nobody can fathom that out of that all these acts will come. and the Paris Agreement goes out of because of that. So we in 50 years time, who knows? But I can tell you we are influencing generation. A lot of people are watching this program. You know, this platform is here. Is health and environment. So any of you have something to discuss, you want to speak to the government, with this platform is here for all of us. It starts here. The advantage we have and what our forefathers didn't have is the access to social media, the accessibility. Hardly people were GRTS now. It's about all these social media platforms. So let us use this to build that critical mass that will force these changes. The old generation, I know, they don't even know how to use Facebook or whatever. So they know our target. Our target audience is about the youths. Let's try to impress on them that we are in a very, very precarious situations. You know, don't ever underestimate the impact we are having on the ground. You know, past 5 years, how many thousands of trees were planted by this was all by the youths, and they get this money from their own pockets. You know, they don't even bother about the government, whether they do it or not. They take it from what, you know, the philanthropy, and it's all down to these kind of platforms. So I hope anytime any of you have something to discuss, but I'll be knocking on your door all the time to try to bring you here, one person at a time or two person at a time, and to make it even more effective. We can just take one subject and come and discuss that, and the following week we bring another text. We used to do it Famara every Monday, I think it was. You know, but we will select a day that suit all of us. That is not like a busy day for all of us, and it will not be a day for the family as well, like weekends, because kids are not at the school. They all want their dads and moms, so we're not going to use it on those particular. But maybe work day someday. You know, we will come here and continue this discussion. Definitely, you know, we will have that critical mass. Eventually, we don't need a political party. All what we need, if we have that critical mass, the youth will demand, you know, from their political parties. Where is the environmental components? That's what they will go and look in these political portfolios. If it is not there, they go and choose whoever is having the most friendly, like as we are seeing in Europe. So thank you all once again for coming and make this a memorable one. And I hope from now on is going to be a weekly program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, both Famara and Ahmed. So look forward to seeing you guys again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom.